History is usually written by the victors, right? And military history, well, it's pretty much full of deception. But what happens when a massive civilization builds its foundational legal code on strictly outlawing treachery, even in the middle of a war? Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking the specific mechanisms, laws, and historical precedents that define war and peace in Islamic law.
We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover. Here's our agenda for today. We'll start by debunking the myth of treachery. Then we'll define treason and treachery, look at the command to fulfill covenants, how honoring treaties was prioritized over strategic advantage, maintaining trust on the battlefield, and finally, justice against illegal occupation.
Section 1. The myth of treachery. Let's start with a big picture premise here. A civilization simply cannot survive for over 1,300 years if its foundation is built on betrayal. Think about it. If the state had been inherently treacherous, mass rebellions would have dismantled it from the inside out in no time. Plus, those vast international trade networks, like the famous Silk Road that spread all the way to places like Indonesia, would have completely collapsed. Commerce and global civilizational expansion relied entirely on trust and enforceable contracts, definitely not systemic treachery.
Section 2. Defining treason and treachery. To really understand the law, we have to look at the Arabic terminology used in the source texts. The first term is al-ghadra. It comes from a root word meaning a pool of water left behind. Legally speaking, it translates to breaking a covenant through abandonment. It's essentially the act of falling behind on your promises. And in Islamic theology, this is taken so seriously that a literal flag of treachery will be raised for the traitor on the day of resurrection. This highlights the ultimate severity of al-ghadra. It's not just some minor legal violation, it carries massive theological weight.
The second term is al-khiyana. This one originates from a root word meaning weakness or deficiency, kind of like a rope losing its strength in fraying. In this framework, treachery was explicitly viewed as an evil, hidden trait that could never be tolerated. And this reveals a really fascinating core concept. Betrayal isn't seen as some clever strategic maneuver or a genius tactical move. It's a fundamental legal and moral deficiency of character that is strictly forbidden, even during an act of war. So the crucial point here is how this framework actually distinguishes between a standard crime and actual treason. Simply breaking a law, or even abstaining from paying a tax like the jizya, well, that's just a crime. It will absolutely be punished under the penal code, but the individual still remains a citizen under the state's protection. It only becomes the ultimate breach of contract, treason, when someone actively takes up arms and rebels against the state's authority. This distinction is absolutely vital for understanding how the state maintained order without automatically treating every single civil offense as an act of war.
Section 3. The command to fulfill covenants.
The theology anchoring all of this is straightforward. The Quran states simply, "O believers, honor your covenants." This is the absolute bedrock of their international law. You must keep your word, period. There's no exploiting loopholes when you've made a legal agreement. And what makes this incredibly relevant today is the specific Arabic word used for covenants, al-uqud. Legal scholars point out that this term is mutlaq, which means unrestricted. It doesn't just refer to religious vows. It legally binds Muslims to all forms of contracts. Because the term is completely unrestricted, complying with your modern residency visa conditions, employment contracts, or a citizenship agreement in any country is actually considered an act of direct obedience to God. Breaking those terms, that's a direct violation of religious law. Section 4. Honoring treaties over advantage. It's really easy to keep a treaty when you're powerful and holding all the cards. But the true test of a legal system is when honoring a contract actively hurts your immediate goals. Take the Battle of Badr, for instance. The Muslim army was outnumbered 3-1, a massive material disadvantage. But just before the battle, 2 captured Muslim soldiers managed to secure their release by making a covenant with the enemy that they wouldn't fight. And the system upheld that covenant. The Prophet refused to let them join the army, despite the desperate need for manpower. The principle of keeping an agreement completely outweighed the extreme tactical risk. Let's look at how this shaped formal statecraft. What happens when a state treaty explicitly forbids granting asylum? The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, signed between the Islamic State of Medina and Mecca, had a highly specific, very one-sided clause. Any man fleeing Mecca to Medina must be returned, but anyone fleeing Medina to Mecca would not be returned. Shortly after this was signed, a Muslim named Abu Basir escaped Mecca and arrived in Medina, desperately seeking asylum. Despite the heartbreaking situation, the treaty was strictly adhered to.
The Prophet handed Abu Basir back to his Meccan captors, stating, "O Abu Basir, we have given these people what you know, and treachery is not permissible in our religion." This firmly proves that the legal contract of the state was paramount. It completely superseded strategic advantage and even emotional ties to fellow citizens. The jurisdiction of the law was absolute.
But there was a fascinating legal loophole. Abu Basir actually escaped his captors again. But instead of returning to Medina, he established an independent coastal camp completely outside Medina's jurisdiction and treaty limits. This independent group began severely disrupting Meccan trade caravans. Because this new camp was legally outside Medina's authority, the state wasn't breaking the treaty at all. And the economic damage was so severe that the Meccans ironically ended up begging the Prophet to renegotiate the treaty just to bring that camp under Medina's control. Talk about a real game changer.
Section 5. Trust on the battlefield. Even in the heat of active warfare, these principles of trust remained completely unshakable. During expeditions into hostile territory, the military operated under strict sequential rules of engagement. Step 1. Invite the enemy to accept Islam. Step 2. If they refuse, demand the jizya tax, which brings them under state protection. Step 3. Only if they refuse both of those options, seek God's help and fight. This highly procedural structure ensured that active war was legally always a last resort. To see exactly how deeply this legal trust ran, consider an incredible incident in the middle of a hostile zone during the expedition to Khaybar. A black Abyssinian shepherd working for the enemy actually decided to convert and join the Muslims mid-battle. But he was currently holding his enemy master's sheep in trust. Despite being at an active war zone where capturing enemy property is totally standard practice, the Prophet ordered him to fulfill his amana, his legal trust. The sheep literally had to be sent back to the enemy master before the shepherd could join the ranks. The legal sanctity of a commercial trust completely superseded the chaos of the battlefield and standard rules of war. Just wild.
Section 6. Justice against illegal occupation. Because the true test of any legal system is whether it actually holds itself accountable, let's jump ahead to the year 711 CE. A military commander named Qutayba illegally occupied the city of Samarkand by bypassing those mandated diplomatic rules of engagement we just talked about. Years later, when Umar bin Abdul Aziz became Caliph, the occupied people of Samarkand realized what had happened and utilized the Islamic State's own legal system to sue the occupying army. Think about that for a second. The state's grievance judge reviewed the facts and ruled in favor of the occupied citizens. The sudden attack was deemed unlawful by the state's own courts. Astoundingly, Caliph Umar bin Abdulaziz backed the tribunal, and the entire occupying Muslim army was legally ordered to immediately abandon their conquest and withdraw from the city. This incredible display of a legal system overriding military might completely shocked the people of Samarkand. It ultimately led them to voluntarily accept Islamic rule rather than fight. Now, obviously, no state is a perfect utopia. The true mark of a just civilization isn't that it never makes mistakes or that rogue commanders never break the law. It's that the system has built-in, accessible mechanisms like the al-Mazalim or grievance courts, designed explicitly to hold its own highest officials accountable and provide genuine redress to victims. It's all about systemic accountability. To quickly recap our explainer today, treachery is categorically forbidden by the legal code. We've seen how modern contracts like visas and citizenship act as religiously binding covenants. We looked at how historical case studies prove that adhering to treaties must supersede any military or strategic advantage. And finally, we saw how the rule of law absolutely demands mechanisms to hold the state itself accountable. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a civilization's longevity is measured by its commitment to its covenants, how well are modern states fulfilling their own promises? When we look at the incredible legal rigor required to maintain a civilization for 1,300 years, we have to scrutinize the systems of justice we rely on today. Are our modern global mechanisms truly measuring up to these historical standards of accountability and unshakable trust? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.